It is the year of the tiger, and you're listening to Queer Lives with me, Hina Siddiqui, where I have conversations with queer people from across the world because I want to. Please do note this podcast deals with mature subjects and explicit language will be used. Audience discretion is advised. Welcome to episode number 6 of Queer Lives with Hina Siddiqui. Today we are talking to Raga D'Silva, corporate speaker, author, LGBTQIA++ advocate, and entrepreneur. A woman who came out at the age of 50 and is now taking the lead in sharing her narrative to help anyone that she can. Welcome, Raga. The woman has spoken. You can hear me clearly.
I can hear you very well.
Okay, great. Yes. Awesome. Hi, Raga. Welcome to Queer Lives. Thank you so much for being with us today. How are you doing?
Thank you, Hina. I'm doing really well. And you know that word, the queer life, it's such a word that I can't really pronounce really well. So I say this is not my word. I am gay. I'm a lesbian. Call me anything, but don't ask me to call me Queer because that's how I pronounce it.
I've been listening to my own recordings and I realize I mispronounce it half the time as well. But it's a fun word. So, we keep at it.
I know. And I love that we are reclaiming that word as well.
Right. So to jump into things, what is your story? And this is like a general question we start off with, so you can take it where you want and share what you want. So what is your story, Raga?
Hina, I hope you have 52 years to record this, but hey, we'll try and do it within like a short time. So I have a very interesting story. I think it's quite interesting. I keep telling people that I came out at 50, but that's not fully true, actually. And I'll tell you why. I was married, and when I grew up in India in the 80s, we didn't have any, role models. We didn't know. I don't even know about things like being a lesbian, or that word didn't exist. I didn't even know that existed. And if I was attracted to somebody, to another girl or another teacher or a woman, I didn't define it because I didn't understand it. There was no social, construct around being gay. So I did have feelings for other girls from my class, and later on when I grew up, but I had no idea. I really thought something was wrong with me, and I genuinely tried to hide it in every possible way, which meant in my case that I dated a lot of guys just to camouflage this whole experience, right? And when we spoke about, being gay, people really genuinely thought that you were happy that day. I feel gay, so they feel like, oh, you're so happy today. I feel gay too, and sadly, in our pop culture or in our Bollywood, if you realize that most of the references to any gay characters were so caricaturish, right? So when you went with family, we would actually wait for that moment when somebody of a gay character would come and make us all laugh. And so they were ridiculed. We laughed along, not knowing, not unknowingly, we thought it was just funny. But that also meant that the families actually felt that they were them and we were different. So that thing didn't happen to us, that happened to other people, and then there was this whole community of, the hijras in India, which also had a huge impact on how we saw the trans world, right? And how we saw the community. So all those, you bring that together. I fell in love with somebody, a female, when I was in my early 20s. I had a beautiful, intense relationship with her. But none of us knew that we could take this any further. So, and I was away, I was in Rajasthan at that time filming, came back to Bombay after 18 months, got proposed to by this man, married my best friend. We had twins, and then we later migrated to New Zealand. He knew, I told him, that I had a brief fling with somebody or an affair with somebody. And he thought it was so cute. He thought, "Arey, phase hai, theek hai, ho jata hai." But we didn't really take it seriously. We didn't really understand the seriousness, or that it could be a foundation for something bigger in life. And so we went to New Zealand, and in New Zealand, I saw a different world. I saw that you could just see two women together, two men together, and nobody really even bothered you. Nobody raised an eyebrow. You were part of mainstream. It was like normal life. You went to somebody's house for dinner, and then, we were all together. We didn't even have those words like heterosexual, homosexual. ऐसे कुछ नहीं था. It was just like a little society of common people working together, being together, regardless of their sexual orientation. So I was exposed to that. My marriage was not working out as these things happen. And as my story goes, I was writing a letter. I had written a letter to a friend of mine. Those days, I'm taking you back to those days when there was only Hotmail and Yahoo, and you actually wrote letters, with a pen, which people, I don't know whether they remember those things called pen, pencil, yeah. And we posted them, and those were the very different days. So I wrote a letter, and I didn't post that letter. I kept that letter in my wardrobe. And my mother, who was visiting me from Mumbai, she found the letter, and I expect mothers to find things that we want to hide, as we know. And so one night when I was putting my twins, I have twins from that marriage, and they were about 4.5 years old. I was putting them to bed, and I saw someone creep into the room. With all I could see is a shiny blade. And as I say, if you read my book, Untold Lies, you would see there's a reference to something called fear, that people can sense fear. There's a smell to fear. There's an energy to fear that when it comes into the room, it goes into you. And my mother, it was my mother, and she was holding a knife, and she was so angry with me that she I mean, she was like, if I had not stopped her, I would have been killed that night, I think. And and her entire decision was based on lack of awareness, lack of understanding, and this whole thing that you're causing shame to the family, you're causing scandal to the family. What are you going to do? Do I have to call you an uncle now? So she assumed that I was going to, change into a man overnight. She was really upset, and she thought that it would be better if I was dead than be alive and bring, all this shame to the family. So that was when slowly, I mean, I was forced to come out in a way. Then, she had anyway exposed me. So I kind of confronted that truth within myself, although I didn't accept it for a long time. I also thought it was a phase because, there's so much of internal homophobia, Hina. So you are kind of so scared to even understand it, forget about accepting it, right? So I was running away from it. Anyway, my marriage ended. I continued working. Where I was working, they got to know that I had now started dating women. And that caused a lot of drama there because, how can a perfect, married couple with two beautiful twins, son and a daughter, perfect family, with a beautiful house and a cool life, how can they separate? So there was a lot of stigma there. And remember, in those days, and even in Indian families, we never told people you were divorced. That was a no. They didn't accept that at all. Matlab, ladki ke saath ladki mein kuch kami hai. That used to happen. So it was always a woman's fault, and it was my fault. And so I ran away from that also. I lived my life. And there was a lot of abuse from the community there. And over time, I basically dated women 4-5 years. I was on my own, single, bringing up kids by myself. And I met my partner now, Nicola, 15 years ago in New Zealand. And she's from New Zealand. She's a Kiwi woman. And she loved the kids. The kids loved her. It was love at first sight for all of us. And 15 years now on, we are together and still together, I should say. And so 3 years ago, my partner, Nicola, and my children, they said to me that, why don't you now talk about your, because we were in private, in hiding. We didn't really talk about it. I mean, our friends, some knew, some asked us, openly. Some never bothered to ask us. They just accepted us. Some ghosted us when they got to know. So there was this whole thing that happens in life. Life happens for everyone. But I decided that, that it was, maybe time for me to come out. So I wrote this book, Untold Lies. And my journey has changed. So no longer is my life about, just about me or my family. My life is now completely broadened into, my family is this chosen soul family. I can hear your cat. Yeah. Cute. So my family is much more, and on a global level, our chosen soul family, like we call them. And it's a very different experience. So today I live a very different life to what I used to lead. One of the things that I do is that I do hold my head high and I walk. I walk with pride that this is my family, this is my partner, and these are my children. That's what it is. So I stopped disowning my own self. Let's say, as you know, I'm writing 2 other books. One is a memoir. One is a story that I wrote during lockdown that is being adapted into a movie, which is now being adapted into a book by me. and we're making a short film on the good and the bad of being a lesbian. Our world, there is so much of darkness also, and there is also a lot to shine and talk about. So doing a whole lot of things in my own way, because I can only use my experience and my skills and my abilities to share, and change the narrative, let's say. So this is my story in a nutshell, and I know it's taken about 15 minutes.
No, don't worry about time. We have all. I believe we have all the time in the world. So that's what I keep repeating to myself and others. Okay. So a few things that I want to get into from what we just shared. You kind of skimmed over the early years of your life. And I want to understand who it was that was the young girl, because you mentioned that in your writing as well. The young girl, and what were her aspirations? What was she like? Like you today, how would you describe that child? And maybe if you had to have a conversation with her, what would you say?
One of the things, it's very interesting you asked me this, because this is a question that I was asked during my London book launch by Amish Tripathi. Because no one else asks these questions, right? They ask about, oh, this chapter reads very well, the story reads very well. But thank you for asking this. See, you can only look back. In hindsight, you can only, talk about things. I think I was a very lonely child, because I was the youngest of 3 siblings. My mother had to go to work when we were very little, because my father passed away when I was 6, very young, and he was bedridden for many years prior. So basically, I remember a childhood, and if you can see the cover of my book, Untold Lies, it has there's a door, and there is a girl standing on a bench trying to open the lock, and that is a real story that happened. So my mother would lock me in with my drunk dad, who would be sprawled on the bed, which I thought was how all dads were, by the way, for many years. And I would be with him all day, and I didn't know what to do. And I would try to get out of the house, thinking that, but I couldn't even reach the latch. And I think that kind of summarizes how the first 15 years of my life was trapped. I was trapped in a world that was not chosen by me. My parents were very educated, but I said my father fell into bad company, and therefore he was bedridden and died very young. Whereas my mother had to go to work. And I'm talking about the 70s, when women didn't really work, So it's a very different world to what we see today. So I was this person, I saw the poverty. There were times, as I've made reference in the book as well, where I didn't have food to eat. I know how it feels to be hungry. Even today, I know how it feels. I can remember those days. I remember not having shoes to wear. I remember having just one dress and that also was probably given to me by a cousin, who then my sister would wear it, older sister, and then it would be passed on to me. So by the time it reached me, it was in tatters. It had been hemmed up and hemmed down like 100 times. So I grew up in that kind of humble surrounding. So to me, I needed to get out. So I feel that I've always been this person who has looked at life from a third person. Like even Amish asked me, he said, why do you talk in third person narration? Because I don't think I want to associate with that person. One, I don't think I associate with that person. So I looked at life from the lens outside, because I don't think I would have been able to cope. Most of my life, I lived in fantasy. So that is that person. But I studied really hard, and I got a scholarship, and I did really well in my education, and then I got into advertising against the family's wishes, because my mother thought a good Catholic girl should become a secretary, but I chose advertising, and so that wasn't like allowed either. So they called me a rebel, but I don't think I was a rebel. I think that's a label that I again mentioned in my book. People give us label because they can't define us, put it, in any other way. I don't think I was a rebel. I think I was very early on. I just knew what I wanted, and I went for it. I was aspirational, as I say, not ambitious, very aspirational. I wanted to do something with my life, and I continued doing. I was just very fortunate that what I wanted and what the universe basically gave to me completely was always in balance. So I won lots of awards. I was the youngest person in India, and in those days, to be the vice president and branch head of a large agency called Lintas. So for me, everything was working out really well until it did not work out. As you say.
Thank you for sharing that with me, and I relate to that on a lot of levels. I understand very deeply the idea of growing up, living in a fantasy and seeing yourself in third person. Um, I, I want to understand when you say you knew what you wanted, but how did you know?
I think all of us, Hina, have a knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And we may be too young to really understand what that is at that time. Like I said, in hindsight, you can put, you can define it, you can put words around it. But I think it is your instinct. You know inside that there's something you don't want. For instance, I
Right.
knew that I wanted to get out of that poverty, that I
Hmm.
knew that I wasn't going to be sitting around and living in the slums all my life. That's where we
Hmm.
grew up, in the slums of Bandra East. I
Hmm.
knew that there were certain things that were like, I did not want to have no clothes, for instance, and I'm saying a double negative here, but
Hmm.
not to have shoes, or to
Hmm.
not go to school events because we couldn't afford it. Or
Hmm.
always, I would, mine, even my best friends those days had no idea about my life. I would pretend,
Hmm.
because in our house, my mother used to say, in Konkani, I'm a Mangalorean, so for some reason they would say, "Hey, he's in Japan."
Hmm.
It basically meant, it's a slang for saying Japan, matlab that person is dead.
Hmm.
But I would genuinely use that in my school, and I would tell my classmates my father is in Japan. My
Hmm.
my my friends actually believed that my father lived overseas. So that fantasy that helped me
Hmm.
survive. Nobody
Hmm.
came,
Hmm.
so that kept me
Hmm.
separated from those people. So I knew early on. That's what I'm saying. How do you know? You know early on that you have to protect yourself. That's what you know. You know early on that certain things you cannot talk about, share, because they will come back to bite you, or that people are not very kind. Now, when you live in the slums, anywhere, particularly in Mumbai, you get the good and the bad. You get the beautiful communal, synergies of the world, which is beautiful.
Hmm. Hmm.
You also get love, and you get the benefits of, living communally, like as I say.
Hmm.
However, you also see a very dark side of life. you
Hmm.
see you see domestic abuse, you see terror, you
Hmm.
see a huge amount of violence around you, not just
Hmm.
in your homes, outside your homes. So
Hmm.
instinctively you protect yourself.
Hmm.
You know
Hmm.
that if you say something wrong, there are 20 people who will take that tale and bring it back to your
Hmm.
home, and you'll get beaten
Hmm.
up.
Hmm.
So I don't know how else to explain, but this is that, you learn very early on what
Hmm.
you want and what you don't want. And they are not just material things. They are
Hmm.
actually what I
Hmm.
call as bubble wrapping. You learn to bubble wrap yourself.
Hmm. Hmm. Again, I'm nodding along, not just because I hear this, but I feel this. And this is completely it's a large reflection of how I've grown up as well. And I truly appreciate you saying this out. Um, so in this space of because a lot of us, we look at our childhood as, well, we look at it as a thing, but never mind, I lost that track of thought. um, um, what place does this idea of orientation, of sexuality, of identity have in this space of growing up, where, like you said, the instinct is to bubble wrap, is to create a world and to then aim for that world that you fantasize about. And what role does any identity factors have in this, or does it have one at all?
See, so growing up, you've got different challenges to when you're
Hmm.
grown up,
Hmm.
and now,
Yeah.
like at 50, you have different challenge. So each time in our life, we are faced with different decisions we have to make, choices we have to make, different difficulties that we have to face. And the growing up itself takes a lot of energy, right? And
Hmm.
we don't even realize that it does take a lot of energy. You're building new friendships, you're learning new things, you're trying to attain the best marks in your grades in your school.
Hmm.
There's a whole lot of things happening. So in that, for me in particular, if I fall for someone, I fall deeply. Okay,
Hmm.
so I would fall deeply for my a teacher that I was totally had a crush on, and for years it was not just like 5 minutes. It was for, like, I think for 6 years of my life. She was the only person that I kind of thought about, dreamt about, considered, and she was lovely. I'd written love letters to her, and she was to date, she's one of my closest friends. Like she's in my life. She's a beautiful woman, and she never made fun of me. But like I said, if you don't have a frame of reference and you don't even know what that is, so you can't even put it into a box and say, I am this person and therefore I'm going to be living this life. So that identity that you're talking about, that identity was not, or sexual identity or orientation, those conversations have not even started in my head at that age. There was attraction and that was it. Bus. I felt good about it. That was it. Bus. I dated boys and that was it. Bus. That was it. There was nothing else. I don't think that I thought about, even when I fell in love with this girl that I had a relationship with, even my mother, when I came back to Bombay, even my mother used to post those letters for me with the envelope all full of hearts, 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 and I love you. But my mother never questioned me, and I even never thought that I was gay or queer or lesbian. Tiny, but just another person I really loved, and everybody kind of embraced that. It was not until I was married and I went to New Zealand, until I wrote that letter to my friend, did I even think about it. That's when I started thinking, I'm so attracted to women, and now I feel attracted. When I'm in a room full of people, if there's a attractive woman, I would rather talk to her than those hundreds of other very senior people. So that was how I was, and that made me think. I always think, Hina, in hindsight, if my mother had not outed me, would I have still been in a heterosexual, maybe not with my ex-husband, but would I have followed the path that I finally was forced to follow in a way? So cutting a long story short, I don't know whether I had talked about an identity within myself. There were many different labels that I was fine with. That I am, whatever, high energy, or whatever people call you. Like I said in the book, selfish. And, I used to think I was a self-sabotager a lot.
Why did you think that?
No, that's because, whenever, if I now even trace my backstory, and I think that because I had so many good things happen to me all the time, but I would come to that top, and then I would, let me tell you about my professional life, for instance. I worked in very senior positions, and when I reached a senior position, then I would want to do something completely different. Like here in New Zealand, I had a $200,000 salary in 2001. It's a lot of money, 6-figure salary, but I didn't want that life. I always wanted challenges. So for me, upar jao, fir start at the bottom again, and then again go upar, start at the bottom again. So a lot of people should tell me you're a self-sabotager, because who does this? And then when my marriage was not working, and that's what they said, you created this beautiful world for you. Who does this? And you're now saying that I don't want all of this the way it is. I want a different life. So that's why.
Again, hard relate on that as well. It reminds me this photographer called Lee Miller, who's well known for photographing the Second World War, and basically someone telling her that the world can't be kept at war to keep you entertained. So this idea that, and I think it also comes down to just this. I wouldn't say trauma, but I suppose it is trauma, where you lived a difficult life, and somehow your mind and body doesn't know how to operate outside difficulty. So you perhaps just keep seeking difficulty in whatever shape and form.
Yeah, possible.
So tell me more about advertising, and how was that a career choice, and how did that work out for you professionally?
Yeah, so professionally, I've done very well. Like I said, in India, I worked in Indian advertising for 10 years, and I worked with one of the best agencies, Lintas. So whenever there was any agency, sorry, I'm just squirming a bit. So whenever there was any agency that needed, like, to start from scratch, they would call me, because that was a reputation I'd built, that I was really good at rebuilding a dying fledgling say division. So they would call me, then I would bring it to a certain point, bring the business back in, bring the clients back in, then I would move on. So that was a fantastic reputation that I had built. Then I went into New Zealand, and when we immigrated there, I had to start from scratch. Nobody was willing to look at your Indian experience, and by the time I got a job there, I had to cut down on my CV. I couldn't write branch manager or vice president or gold medalist or all my list of awards. All I had to say, postgraduate, one page. That's when I started getting an interview. And things were quite different at that time. And I rebuilt myself, like I said, and I just got back into advertising. I did really well in New Zealand. Again, like huge salary, great awards, lots of fantastic work we did. So advertising was my home. It was a safe home. I although say I now look at the dichotomy of my life, right? There's two people. One coming from completely humble background, no food to eat, no clothes, proper clothes to wear. And then I moved around in circles, which was completely different. Advertising those days was only for the sobos. They were the affluent who went to really, really rich, boarding schools, went to affluent colleges, and then they came back to India, and then they created this world. And I was in that world, and I fitted in very well in that world. So again, I think the reason I fitted in really well is one, because people, the way I was, and third person. So I was always this character that I played, I think. And I always, when I walked out of my home, I would tell myself, today you're going to do the best that, be with the best version, what we say today. Those days I would say, today you're going to have the best day of your life. And I would do that every day. So I think advertising gave me the opportunity to actually grow as a person. I learned about the world. When you work on different brands, your exposure is not just limited to one, linear exposure. I had this multiple things that were happening. I would work on a banking client, Jet Airways. I was part of the launching team. Then next I would be working on an oil brand. So you had this whole different, diverse people also around you. The clients were diverse, people were diverse. There was a lot of in advertising, there were the LGBTQ, what we call community. There were a lot of gay men who were copywriter and art director partners. And so sad in hindsight, Hina, to say, one, they were either, most of them were ignored, or they were like behind their backs, they were bullied or let's say ridiculed, sadly. They say, "Arey, wo homos, unke paas leke jao, go to them and get the copy to be done by them," And I think to myself, I never stood up for any one of us. I would say, because it never it just didn't strike me that was wrong. And I regret those times. But that was advertising. And the advertising is the same, whether it is in India or whether it is in New Zealand. I worked in both markets. People are quiet, open, liberal, but at an individual level,
right,
they're quite homophobic as well.
You mentioned earlier that advertising wasn't a space for women. It wasn't a common career choice at that time. I don't think it is one right now as well, but things are a little better. Were there challenges from that perspective, from your gender perspective, that you were a woman in a man's space? Was that something that you had to negotiate?
No, I think, like I said, I am like, I don't know. I think I make my life look like magic, but it was like that. Maybe I can't, my mother always used to say to me that you don't look at life like how everybody else does, but I actually can't see. I was so welcomed and so embraced in the industry. I got even in New Zealand, my male partners were getting, much lesser salary than I was. Like I remember getting interviewed for a job, and they gave me a certain figure. I said, sorry, in New Zealand. Okay. Remember at this time I had hardly anything in my pocket and two little children to look after. But I said, no, this is not going to work for me. It's too low for me. That recruitment agent actually got me double of that. That was my 200,000. I got it. And how, people get to know about it. The grapevine is very strong anywhere, you see. And the men used to fight with the director saying, how can she get so much double of, what I'm getting? So I had the ulta problem. But I think I had to, that again, I think you asked me this lovely question earlier about how did you know? I think somehow, because of my childhood, I had somehow learned that you cannot, if you don't ask for food, you will not get food.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like the same thing. I think I applied that in my life, that if I didn't ask for this pay, I was not going to get it. And I was strong enough to say that, I have the credentials, dena hai, do to jao. And people always use that. They get scared of people who are like strong and assertive, right? Or they come across as strong and assertive. So I don't think I had a gender disparity issue, not but what I observed, I'll tell you what I observed during my early days. I observed that it was a man's world in advertising. I'm talking about early 90s. Alec Padamsi used to be the head honcho of Lintas those days. It was his world. Even his meeting was called prayer meeting. So he was God, and he used to hold prayer meetings every Monday. We used to go to God's den and we used to listen to the prayer. Sachi, this is it. This is what it was. This is true story. All men spoke, all women sat quietly. I'm going to, sound horrible here, but all the pretty girls, all the ones who were like really pretty, I mean, who, as we define pretty, like, and I know there's a stereotype of being pretty, he would point out and then they would be given claps, and it was like a whole, like watching a movie. I learned from that. I saw my manager, all my managers were always women. I saw my managers going back to the cabin wearing suit. They dressed like men, they smoked all day, they put their feet on the table and they sat. They became aggressive, and like all the traits of we as a stereotype man that we don't like in our bosses, they had become. And I would observe it and I would think to myself, ye nahi banna hai. Whatever. But that was because if it didn't feel good for me, that means it wasn't good. And what I did is very genuinely, naturally, I became the opposite. I would wear only saris and I would dress up in a different way. I was the softer one. The way when I managed people, I managed them in a very non-dictatorial way, because that was advertising was very dictatorial. The boss came and told you what to do, right? That worked for me, I think, through my life. So you work through observation, and you can either become that person or you can become the person you want to be.
I think that's a very, very important little tip for all of us in various careers, not just advertising. But thank you for sharing that. So how has the relationship with your children? You have twins, a boy and a girl, and clearly things were, dare I say, rosy when they were born, and things changed on the personal front as they grew up. So how did that relationship evolve? And
the relationship with the children has always been beautiful and magical. I say joyous. That's not changed, because the children don't judge you. The children don't sit back unless you give them an opportunity to say, tell me what you think about it. Because if it's so, because it's so naturally progressed. They were very little when their father and I separated, for instance. We made a choice, a very decision, Ravi, their father and I, that we were not going to have conflict around them. That was one of the reasons we had separated, that it was not working out for them. So we are not going to, be around for how we say, for the sake of the kids, stay in a marriage that's not working out. It didn't mean that we didn't try. We tried really hard for a few years, but we didn't stay around in the marriage for the sake of the kids, because we both knew that we did not want the kids to see their mom and dad staying into separate rooms or having any kind of dysfunctionality, because that is we know from our own childhood that is what we carry through our lives. And for me, like I said, for many years I thought a good dad was somebody who slept all day, drunk and slept all day. To me, that was my frame of reference. So when the children saw me dating other women, they saw their father was dating other women, they saw the father and I getting along well. They saw, I think they saw just normal life. That was their normal life. Of course, we went through a phase, like I said, when there was a lot of abuse externally, not from our families, outside. My family had shunned me. They had ostracized me. They had cut off ties with me. So we only had people that we knew in New Zealand. And when the kids were little, and in New Zealand, like I said, our Indian community abused me. So there I was ostracized. The others had stopped inviting the kids over for sleepovers and all, only because, when you are, it was nothing to do with my sexual orientation at that time, I think. It was to do with when two people separate, friends don't know whose side to be on, right? So they ghost you, what is called ghosting now, right? In the younger generation, they say, chalo, bye-bye, not interested. And that was fine too. But it all eventually worked out. So the children, as they grew, and this is so when they were about 9-ish, Nicola came into our life. We, like I said, now they're 24. They've always considered her as a mother. Although they call her Nicola, She's their mother. My son Ash, on his 18th birthday, actually changed his name by choice, but by default, as Ash Fenton. She's a Fenton, I'm a D'Silva. So they made their own choices, and they are absolutely like okay about it. I took them for my book launch in London 2 weeks ago, and they had not heard my story because they're ghar ki murgi. It's like it's the same. What is there to listen? And they don't live with us anyway. So my both my kids they came and they hugged me and they said, "Mom, I didn't know this part of your life." And I said to them, this is the reality. A woman has this life which she shows to the world. And because you can get beaten up at home, as you know, and you go and laugh and sing and do your work. Bless you. And I got that sneeze. And you have to look after your children. You have to have a social life. So nobody outside yourself at times knows what you're really going through. And so the children are now really understanding. They have empathy. Both of them have more gay friends than they would. And they don't even think it's gay friends or straight friends. They're just friends. But from the outside, I see them having just this beautiful, non-prejudiced, non-judgmental, very accepting. And I think that children like mine are making the world a better place.
I agree. I think young people have it far more sorted than any of us do.
Yeah.
Could we talk about yours and Nicola's relationship? How did it start? What happened? What were some of the high points?
Yeah. So I used to be, Nicola and we were talking about it today. It's like, oh my God, our love story. It's very interesting. It's just such a simple story, but it's like, wow, this happened to us. So I met Nicola at a time when I used to travel quite a bit. So I was elected as on the India New Zealand Business Council board in New Zealand. And Nicola used to work at the New Zealand Parliament at that time, and she used to manage all the facilities, which means she used to do all these, events that you do when you have heads of state and stuff like that. So they had invited the India New Zealand Business Council members to the Parliament for dinner, and we had this event. I met her. I had no idea what her orientation was. She had no idea because sorry to say this, but we are so against stereotyped in thinking that a gay man would look like this, a gay woman would look like a lesbian, right? So both of us didn't present ourselves in a stereotypical manner. So I had no idea. She had no idea. We exchanged cards, but I liked her. And I hoped that she would respond and write to me, at that time. But this is a long time ago. Remember 15 years ago, again, it's like WhatsApp nahi tha. If you message somebody, it cost you like lots of money. Text. So you only send text to people that you were willing to basically spend as much as you would spend on a coffee. Or maybe more than that, right? So it was like it was not used as liberally as we use today. So, and then I was going to China in a couple of days. So I met her for coffee and she didn't show much interest. She said, so when she's back from China, we will catch up. Nothing. I came back from China, no message from her. So I said to her, then okay, TK. I said, let me try. I said, would you like to meet for breakfast? Again, not knowing, okay, whether she's into men or women. I had no idea. So she said, yeah, okay. So on a Sunday, we met at 10 o'clock and we haven't stopped meeting. Yeah, that is the best way I can put it. We didn't ever have a serious conversation saying, Hina, would you like to date me? Hina, should we do this? Nothing. We met for coffee that day and then we met again. We went for a walk and then she said, would you like to meet for dinner? So I had to arrange childcare. Then met for dinner and then we never stopped. So it was like we just got along. And I still remember that day. And I remember telling her, I really want to do two things in my life. One is write a book. And two is leave some kind of a legacy, so that whatever I have been through is not lost, that the future generations learn from this. And at that time, I didn't even know what I was talking about. It just came out of me. And it's all come true. You keep careful.
I am very happy for you, and I love the facial expressions going on as you talk about this. You mentioned that it was more there was no decision per se, like there was no let's date, let's move in, but there must be given that there was one relationship, a long-term relationship that wasn't that great, and now that this is clearly the thing for you, I'm not going to ask for the difference, but how are things? How are conversations different? How's your equation different? I mean, I'm sure it doesn't just have to do with the orientation, but how does that? Tell me a little bit more.
I think a person doesn't change, right? The person remains the same. Like I said, I would have been with Ravi now, maybe to start 26th year if I was going to be with him. My relationship with him was on the premise of a friendship. That hasn't changed. I love that man. I will always love him, and there is no insecurity with between Nicola and me on that. He's the father to my children. Him and I have history together. I've always loved him like this. I've never been in love with him. So that is the difference. So it's always this change in you. So nothing changed after we separated. Of course, we had a lot of conflict, huge amount of conflict we had to work through. What we see today has come through a lot of work, a lot of hard work. And I think from both sides, you have to nurture what you have. You have to bear the brunt of what the society says. Imagine a man whose wife has left him, then is with another woman. You can only imagine what people would have told him. You're not man enough, was what he heard a lot. And he used to tell me that. And eventually he came to a point where he said to me that he told himself that it was nothing it's not about me, it's not about him, that it was about me, that I was finding my space for me. It had nothing to do with him. So that, I think it's a good way to make peace. Now, when it came to my relationship with Nicola, I think it was so organic and so beautiful for us. I think it's almost like two souls meeting, and we're just so compatible. Of course, we've had our ups and downs. I mean, which couple doesn't have? But I think there is a lot of respect in our relationship. Even like now, she made lunch for me, for instance. I will never just eat it. I always say, thank you so much for making the time for me. And so we make sure that we, even now, after 15 years, we don't take each other for granted at all. If I have done something it's not for her or for me, but done something, she would say, thank you for doing this today, So these are things that we have maintained in our relationship. We really spend time nurturing each other. So we, even now, Hina, we will have a date night, and we make sure that at least twice a week, now that we are semi-retired, we take, and we don't talk about kids, otherwise, end up as parents, we end up talking about this happened, that happened, this we have to do. There's always responsibilities. So we keep the responsibilities away. When we have a date night, we just talk about us, about our life, about our travel plans, about whatever. That's us. We work together 24/7. So we live together. We do everything together. Our friends ask us, "Bore nahi hote ho?" Because I think they use their yardstick to, we don't actually. It doesn't mean that it was always like this. There are times that we go through, like, I can't stand her. I'm sure she feels the same. You want space, and we give each other that space, but we talk about it. It's very important, communication. There are times I just know that, she needs to be left alone, and she knows that. So I think, and then the relationship that we have to manage between her and I, and my relationship with my ex-husband, he's in our life also because of the children. It's it takes a lot of maturity from everyone, including the children, to maintain that relationship. And I think that is the power of having a partner that is very understanding, and that is where love is important, but respect is far more important. And remember, in between that, I also was dating other women. I had another relationship with another woman, which was quite bad, which was quite violent, let me say. It was full of jealousy, insecurity, because I still had my married name. That was quite intense. So I carried that baggage as well into this relationship. And that was not easy. So I always say, I think Nicola put my broken pieces together. So, and I think, I don't know, I believe that I'm a better piece today than I was all those years ago, So nice. I say it if nobody else says it.
Getting better with age, like wine, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What about your mom? You mentioned that she had a violent reaction to things, and I'm assuming that the letter had certain declarations that said, that spoke about your identity, and that was her reaction to it, but then has there been a repair? Has there been evolution?
I don't know, but my observation again of Indian families, and it comes from my own maybe references from not my extended family also, and the families that I've seen with my friends circle, or maybe it is the time that I was growing up. We don't really express. That's the biggest problem. We don't really communicate. There was a head of the family who sat at the head of the table, and that was it. They spoke, you listen, and you didn't respond back. So I come from that time. It's different with our children now because we talk about everything. There's no, we don't hold back. But with my mother, so if she ever said something, you listen, and it was hardly ever that we answered back. That was the time when the parent-child relationship was different. So when she had this reaction, and also I think the kind of person I always try and see what is it that you're feeling because of which you're reacting like that. I've always been like that for whatever reason, and that hasn't changed. So very quickly I saw, while I was very scared for my life and I was fearful and it's just traumatic. It still is actually. But I also realized this is a woman who's brought up her children with so much of love, and she gave everything for us. Here is the youngest child, and I was a favorite child as the youngest one. Had a fairy tale. She used to tell everybody, "Ye to meri pari hai," she used to say. I'm living a fairy tale life. And here again, I'm saying I don't want that life. So at two levels, you could understand this person who has given up everything. She used to travel second class, and she used to make sure that I got a first class ticket. So that woman, imagine having to see that child making, as per her, two wrong decisions. One is leaving the marriage, and two is thinking of dating women. So for her, that was quite traumatic, I would say. So my first decision was to let her be. I let her be. She didn't talk to me for 2 years. For 2 years, no matter how many times I called her, she didn't take my call. One fine day I called her, she took my call like nothing had happened. We never spoke about it because, as I say, in our families, we never talked about it. But we do things. We express our love or our acceptance through other ways. For instance, she came and stayed with me when we moved to India for a couple of years. She stayed with us with Nicola and I. Her and Nicola became the best of friends. She would tell her her best recipes. She taught her Mangalorean cooking. She would take her out shopping. So that is how she made peace. We never spoke about it. I would have a glass of wine or whiskey every night with her because she loved a glass of rum. That is how she showed her acceptance. Saath mein raho, you eat, I'll cook for you, I'll look after your Nicola and the children, that way. When she passed away very suddenly. I was there. I knew that we had somehow made peace with it. I have made peace with her. I don't know whether she ever made peace with me, but I felt that she did. And that is why one of the things, if anybody's listening in to this, I feel that, I encourage everyone that don't leave things half finished. Communicate, express yourself, because really life, the only regret you will have is that you did not say something. Everything else will go on. Life will go on.
I also think that even for us in India, the narratives of any kind of identity related family issues are very white driven or very American driven. And there is this emphasis in that to, either to make it black or white, to say that either there is complete 100% acceptance or there is violence and angst. And I do relate to this because in India, that's not how things work. You're right. We don't talk about things. We don't make decisions on, okay, this is where I stand on something and with your family members. And there is a certain grit that is needed to kind of establish that status quo, if nothing else, because the status quo does change.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like this mom not talking to you is a very big thing here. Mom just doesn't talk to you. And then you have to wonder.
Yeah, no, and also, at least I tell myself I was fortunate that my mom didn't do a lot of drama that I now know in our community. The moms do is like emotional blackmail. I will not eat for the rest of my life. I will kill myself. That whole Nirupa Roy syndrome, where everything becomes about me. I'm coming out to you, or you found out about my sexual orientation. Instead of listening and instead of rejecting me, what you do, hi, मेरे साथ ये क्यों हुआ? Why did this
Yeah,
happen to
right.
me?
Why am I
Why
being
did the
punished?
why am I being punished? Why I have been cursed? It's not about you. It's like I spent like 3 months looking in the mirror and practicing this every day, and now you're making it about you. Sorry, but that's what we do, right? We make it all
Right.
about us, and that has to change. We need better role models even in our Bollywood films. No more Nirupa
Right.
Roys.
Yeah. Because especially with any mention of homosexuality, the mother's reaction to things and is still a
Yeah.
thing. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about your sisters? You mentioned having two older sisters.
No, I have
And
a oldest brother, elder brother, and a
okay.
sister. Yeah.
Right.
Let me say that we've never spoken about it.
Okay.
Never. Uh, it's like they have just back in my life a little bit, but we never speak. But the way they will show their love is like yesterday, my sister sent her daughter's photograph, and it was a birthday, and she said, Rishu is just like you, like a tomboy. Like, usko say label. She wears, and she showed me photographs. She wears, my rings. I'm known for my rings. So she wears rings and she dresses up like me. So that is her way of saying that I'm okay with it.
Right. Right.
I think that's the only way I'll get that with that peace. I think even with my siblings, they won't say, they're never going to hold my hand and say, oh, I heard you're gay, then I love you for it. Yeah, they'll never say. We have taboo subjects, right? Like, look at our Indian families. I don't know how it is now, but on television, two people come together. They didn't even kiss during our time. Old movies, Amitabh Bachchan and Rekha, or Amitabh Bachchan and Jaya Bhaduri just came close to each other, and all they would show is the birds, flying away and the trees flying away. But at that time, the families used to get so uncomfortable. All of us used to run to the kitchen to get a glass of water. I mean, that's our Indian families. How do you sit in such families and tell them, you know what, I'm actually gay? And they're like, ye kya hota hai? There's no word for it. Even in Hindi at that time, there was no word. Like, ye kya hota hai? I went to the US with many years ago by myself. I was sitting around this is an American family sitting around the table. Somehow the conversation started about talking about the gay, and lesbians, and uncle was sitting at the table, who I call uncle. They called him by the first name, like 70 odd year old. And he sat there and he said, and staring at me. And he said, how do you do it? I was shocked. It's the only thing he could think about. Like, how do you do it? I'm thinking, how do you do what? ऐसे थोड़ी कि cooking की recipe है कि मैं बताऊं कि यार एक टमाटर डालो, put 2 onions, एक chili डालो, तीन डाल दो chili. Like, am I like, how do you do it? Like, people. So sexual orientation, the word itself brings in the word sex, right? And the moment people, you tell them about your sexual orientation, instantly they think about sex, and instantly they say, how do you do it? And they're thinking about 2 women, 2 men together. That whole stars, and then there is all this taboo, and then all this table ke niche baith jao, TV ke piche baith jao. So we have to, I keep saying that, should we call it love orientation? Because it is about love, right? It is not about, maybe that is when the world will accept more. But I'm so cynical, I think they will not. Because we'd rather have hate, than have love. Hate is easier because you have more people that way on your side.
The academic part of this. So I identify as asexual. I am asexual, and which means I don't experience sexual attraction, but I do experience romantic attraction. And there's this whole sense of having the conversation around romantic and sexual attraction being two separate things, though most narratives kind of merge them together. Just a little information for the listeners.
Thank you. But I mean, I've had asexual friends. I have, and I understand. And but even within that, there are so many, what do you call substructures, right? This is my problem with the new generation. That is why I wrote that book. ये label, हर चीज के लिए label है, हर चीज के लिए sub labels है. Yeah, I'm 50 years old. I cannot remember. You expect me that I'm demisexual. अभी क्या हो गया? I'm pansexual. Okay, I can, what I'm saying is, you be whatever you want to be. I accept you fully. Your choice. I love you for who you are. But yet, for you to expect me to, in a conversation with somebody, they kept on saying, they. I'm thinking, yeah, they which make you more. Why is it saying they? Kya do मैं इसको? What they were trying to tell me basically what they were trying to tell me is that their pronouns are they and them, and I was calling them he and him. They every time sentence you would say they. I'm thinking this person, what does he want from me? But it is very difficult to change that vocabulary. I make a real effort, and I think anybody listening in should respect that, and whatever you shared, respect that, and make sure that we use the right pronouns. But it is not always easy, and that is where I want to make these two things. So if somebody is giving you saying the wrong pronouns, please don't go up against them, because it's not, sometimes it's ignorance, and sometimes it is difficulty to remember, because it will take time. That is one. And the same thing about, you asked about my mother and about my siblings. I took like 30 odd years to find myself, and even minutely accept myself. Why should we expect our parent to sit with them and tell them, and immediately they have to say, "Arey bacha, shabash, come, I will embrace you and I will take you to my fairy world and I will give you all my legacy." Nahi hota hai. They give them time, give our parents time to understand, to accept. There will be some beautiful parents who will say, "No worries, we will learn about it together." But there will be some parents who will want to be parented. Parent your parent.
So I do a lot of sex ed sessions and stuff with young people, and one of the things I tell them is that you can't bring up homosexuality with your parents the day you're coming out. You need to like help them, ease them into it. You can't be like, "This is what gay means, I am gay."
I know, dhire dhire, bhai. Yeah, like, really, if they're not used to eating biryani, you give them khichdi first. Because we are the biryanis, right?
Just a quick, since we are on the topic, did you have the birds and the bees talk with your kids?
Yes, I did. But for some reason, even to date, they laugh about it. But this is my nature, because I think everything is funny. I actually drew a cow. I have no idea. I was trying to tell them about the bees, and I drew a cow, and I drew like a little penis of a cow. I don't know why. I have no idea. And that is how they learned about biology. To date, they think like cows. Yeah. I think they have a photograph somewhere. But seriously, that's how I taught them about biology. I didn't know how else to teach them. I had no idea. We didn't have, remember, we have not been brought up in that environment. Humko to, when I was in college, I still remember my first kiss only because for the next 6 months, I thought I was pregnant. I would look at my tummy every day. Every day. Thanks to Amitabh Bachchan. I'm telling you, in the Julie movie, because in Shashi Kapoor movies and that Julie, I Love You, that movie, some movie I watched, where all they did was come together, and the next they had baby, and they were thrown out of the house. Right, that was a reference. I thought somebody came even close to you, their lips touched you, you got pregnant, and the next your mother was going to throw you out of the house. Seriously. So this is how we lived. I mean, where do you talk about sexuality even to yourself? Because when you don't have the basics of biology. And that is where we have a problem right now, where people don't understand the difference between a trans woman and a lesbian. And that is where sex and gender, right? What we're born with and what we identify as. And that is the biggest problem I have in we have corporate conversations. They ask me this all the time. So, ma'am, what kind of a toilet do you want? I tell them 5-star preferably, with hot seat, auto button, gold plated. It should like what do you mean? Are the children, are they your own, or they're adopted? Like adopted from? Like, why are they not my own? But you're a lesbian, no? So what? If you're a lesbian, you can't have children. So, but you see, while you and I are laughing about it, but this is our biology. So are you surprised that I taught my children about biology and, sex by drawing a cow?
I want that picture. Please find it.
They were very little. They were 5 or 6 years old. It was pinned on my fridge with a magnet. And every day I would look at it and say, see, yeah.
If you don't drink your milk. Okay. So, this has been a great hour. It's been an hour already. I think we should. This will take about 10 minutes more. Is that okay? Yeah.
Absolutely.
I want to know a little bit more about your corporate training, especially like since you already kind of got into that. And what is it like? Because I believe you speak to a lot of Indian companies about diversity and inclusion. So what has that experience been? How hard is it coming out in the corporate world or talking about it? And yeah, that part.
So going back, in the corporate world, I was told that because I have two nose pins and I have a tattoo and my hair is quite decent right now, but I have different colors inside. So I was told that in India, I would not be accepted. That because I run businesses, that our business would not grow because I presented myself in a certain manner. So that was the biggest barrier that they put. It never happened. If anything, more doors opened for me. That's why I said, no, I don't know. Maybe I look at life differently. So more doors opened for me. My business never got, compromised because of my look. If anything, people were more friendly and accepting and happy. Of course, they didn't know that I was gay. That is a different story. So when my story came out, then of course a few people became over friendly and they wanted to be part of the big, as you know, the rainbow. And the others ghosted us, and that was okay. And so, but it hasn't really compromised the business. Now coming to my training. So because of my experiences in working in India, running businesses in India, and then working in New Zealand, I've lived in London for the last 10 years. So I've got varied experience and I've traveled the world on work. Like I've done work in China, Hong Kong, Middle East, Sri Lanka, Malaysia. So all these worlds I have had very interesting convergence, let's say. I've seen diversity. I have had conversations with people who know my orientation, with people who do not know at all, and people who have got to know. So, those kind of things you kind of observe. So I created this whole, through my experience, I have a program called the unconscious bias. So, and I do a lot of talks on unconscious bias, the biases that we face on an unconscious level. And that's actually a talk I do for an hour, because I know while people say come and run a workshop for 3 hours and all, I just say this is the best you can do, because you don't need more than an hour to understand that we all are biased. All of us are biased. We have negative and positive bias, and because since we are born, things are fed to us, right? And how do we manage those biases, the ones that don't work? Are we aware? So we have to be aware of the biases. Then we have to unlearn, and then we have to relearn. Stereotype saying that wo moti hai to bahut funny hogi. That taklu will be if you wear chashma, then you're very intelligent. This is the basic, right? I wear 3 chashmas sometimes because I want to be super intelligent. Like that, seriously, like this kind of stereotype nonsense that we are thrown with throughout. So that is the unconscious bias. In that 1 hour keynote, I also talk about bringing various not workplace experiences. What does it mean actually? What happens? And there's simple things we don't even realize, like standing at a coffee table and coffee machine and talking, and then somebody walks in who is from the community, and suddenly you stop talking. So you are making the other person feel uncomfortable. I have to work around that. When you're on an airplane and you see somebody of another religion praying in a different way, you suddenly start panicking and think, "Ye to kya hai? Something's going to happen." Or if you see a female pilot, how do you react? What is an instant reaction? So it's a very interesting program. That's what I do. Now in diversity and inclusion, I'm on a few boards in India, Sony Pictures and Aristocrat and a few others. And they are fantastic. At least intent is good. So that is most important. The intent has to be good. But my general observation is this whole nonsense that we have created. Ek to allies hai, and then there is the whole corporate companies, organizations who want to have a tokenistic approach. Tick in the box. I got a lesbian, I got a trans person, I got a gay man, I've got asexual, I've got like all this LGBTQIA. Inko pata bhi nahi kya hai. Tick in the box they will do, and they will be happy. They've done their work. Then they will have somebody who will come and I'd be very careful. So they will have people in the company who are allies. Allies have we need allies, right? Our community needs allies, and it's beautiful to have allies. However, there are a lot of allies. I know them many, and I tell them what I think of them. They will come and cling on to you because it makes them look good. It makes them feel good. They get an award on your behalf because they are an ally, because they know five of us. So they get rewarded and awarded. Okay, they're doing it purely for their benefit. So these are things that I talk about. That be careful. You want to sensitize people. You remember, like, if I'm a Catholic, I belong to a certain faith. In my house, I live a completely different life to what I live in my office, to what my next colleague sitting next to me goes through and lives, right? So we've got this diversity within our own organization. We are inclusive in our own organization. So we don't need to be teaching people that. However, are we respectful? Do we empathize? Those are core values we don't understand. And if you find somebody's sexual orientation, does that bother you, and why? So what we will do is, we in organizations, we do a blanket DNI. Yeah, what works for you is not going to work for me. It has to be somehow we have to find a solution at an individual level. Because see, we are different. In India, two people are quite different. So anyway, so this is what I talk about. I'm on a few boards. I love to be on boards because that's where the change happens. No, really, change doesn't happen at because if your board doesn't allow, accept it and understand at the
Yes.
lowest level, how will you, even implement it?
So it's also, so for you it's more about being, not more about, but it's top down as well as bottom up, because the trainings are
there's a particular bank, if came up with this big scheme where you could go into the bank and you as a same-sex couple open a bank account, and I'm not going to name them because they don't like me, but that's the reality. I say it the way it is, because then a couple went in to open the bank account. Right from the officer or clerical person who opens the account, no idea. What? Lesbians can open an account? Batao, kahan dekha? So they had to get their phone out. They had to actually show their own bank's promotion to the person working there full time and make them understand. Then he called the branch manager. Branch manager had no idea. He also had to look at the same. And they said, we will sort it out. We'll come back to you. They've never come back to them. So you see, somebody has promoted something really fantastic, beautiful idea, but nobody else has been informed in the branch. So what happens? It backfires.
Again, out of curiosity, are there workshops or trainings that you do for anyone who's looking to have these conversations within their companies or within their workspaces?
See, I don't do trainings. Like I said, I don't do workshops and training. It's a lot of I believe in workshops and training, but I think that what we can do within an hour, we don't need to do it in 3 hours. So there's workshops and training. Their intent is different. Their format is different. The structure is different. I don't really believe in that. I believe in a kind of a keynote kind of a session, impactful.
Right.
Do your talk, get someone to do few examples. That has more impact than actually sitting through a whole program.
Right.
And really, I don't know what is the measure, how you measure that.
I get that. So if there was one thing that you had to give, like one piece of, I wouldn't say advice, but like one tip that you had to give someone within the corporate space about unconscious bias, or about being more inclusive regardless of what their identity orientation is, what is that one tip you would give?
I would say that it is very important to bring your whole self to work. And I know we say a lot of that in our community. Bring your entire self to work. It's not easy. It's very, very difficult, because there will be certain things, like you get stuff happening at home. Something must be happening with your relationship somewhere. And then things are not, sometimes maybe your colleagues are being, they're bullying you or being abusive towards you, or managers not being kind to you. But somehow every day you have to bring your entire self to work. That is the best way, because otherwise, it's not living your truth. And like I say, closets are for clothes, not to hide your truth. And it's important that you don't put anything in the closet. Otherwise, like my mother, you will find things and it won't be a happy ending.
On that note, is there anything that you want to talk about, or you think I didn't know enough to ask about, or anything that you want to add to this?
Hina, you're a fantastic moderator. You're a fantastic listener. And I think you have actually taught me, and I think that is what we should leave people with, that love is important, but respect is more important. Being a good listener, when somebody comes to you and talks to you, listen. Don't immediately say, I had the same problem. You're listening, yeah? Because we do that a lot. And please don't make anything only about you. When somebody comes to you, and whether they come out to you or whether they share something, please understand it is about that person. You have no idea what that person has gone through and how much that person has rehearsed to share that 1 second of information with you. Show respect. To me, that is the one word I want people to remember: respect.
And that brings me to the final point. We usually do a prompt or a provocation for anyone who's listening, so that they can respond to it on social media or on a private message or something. Do you have a prompt or a provocation for our listeners?
Yeah, sure. I just want to ask people out there, ask yourself, are you the ally that you wish you were? Be honest. And what does allyship mean to you? I'd love to know, really.
And of course, this is an ally in every sense, not just for the queer community.
Yeah,
just allyship, right?
Yeah, Hina, we are all allies to somebody's cause, right? We're all, we haven't talked about intersectionality, but see, look at us, right? Women, I'm a divorced woman, I'm of a certain age, I'm a Catholic woman from India. I live an immigrant life, no matter how many years I live outside of India. So there's so much of intersectionality. And then I'm a queer woman, and then I'm a mother, like the labels and sub-labels and structure. So I'm also an ally to other people who are, the Black community. Maybe I'm just giving examples. So we are all allies in somebody else's cause, fight. We have to be kind to each other. We don't need to learn this. This is a given. Hina, when you first came to me and you asked me, I said, please don't have any formality with me, because there is no, we should not have those barriers and boundaries. Boundaries are important, but no barriers. You should not hesitate to reach out to me because of my age or because of who you think I am. Because that is where we are equal. We talk about inclusion, we talk about equality, and guess what? We don't practice it.
Specifically you're telling me not to be formal, it made things so much easier for me. I didn't even realize I was carrying that much weight in this communication, and not just in communicating with you, it made it easier for me to communicate with others that I was approaching for this.
Fantastic.
So thank you. And it's not even something I considered. I was just like, communication class में सिखाया है ना कैसे बात करते हैं वैसे बात करना चाहिए.
So you don't need a workshop for that, right? No, you understand what I'm saying? All you need is to express it for 1 hour with somebody, and it's understood. We get too much into structured education, and I think that's something which we need to change.
So that's it from my end. I think I've had a very satisfying hour and 15 minutes
wow,
talking to you.
Thank you. Hina, that was wonderful.
It was really, it's just so nice to be able to talk to people and just learn so much more about people and lives and whatnot. It's really the reason why I do this. I want to talk to people and learn about people. So thank you so much for your kindness and grace and just your openness.
Thank you, and thank you for letting me talk so much. And there are lots of things I shared with you which I don't share with others. So and that says a lot about you as a moderator, as a host. So I thank you for that, and thank you for, if I may say, for coming out to me. And that is important for me, and I respect that, and I hold that very closely. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And stay in touch.
Yes, definitely. All right then.
Okay then. Take care. Have a good night. It's very late for you, no?
Oh, my night is just beginning. I've shifted to night shift because of the heat.
Okay, I hope I don't wish you warm, then I wish you cold.
Yes, please wish me lots of cold.
Okay, bye. Take care.
Bye. Yep. Bye. Okay, bye. Love is important, but respect is everything. This hour with Raga has been cathartic for me in a lot of ways. This is why I do this thing, guys. In in the hope that we find resonance across our queer lives. Do think about allyship, and while you're at it, check out Raga's book, Untold Lies, Storiums When Stories Become Poems, A Personal Journey to the Truth, available on Amazon. And if you liked what you experienced and would like to get more, check out my website, dragonsandrainbows.com. That's dragonsandrainbows.com. And finally, if you are or know queer people who'd like to talk about their queer lives with me, Hina Siddiqui, please do get in touch with me over social media or send me a message through my website. That's it from me, Hina, and hope to see you next time for more Queer Lives.